Hey y'all,
What's going on, guys?
I'm Jay,
And I'm Chris the Bird Nerd.
and
And
we
we
are
are the
the
Bird
Bird
Brains.
Brains.
I feel like
All
it's been a
right.
while since we've done that, Jay. I think we did it
Well,
our last video, but maybe
yeah,
not. I
but
don't
then
remember.
so the reason this video is happening, we got to episode 67 without a problem. I guess we had a problem the very first episode. It took us a while to
That's
figure it
true.
out.
That's true.
But starting with episode two, we were fine.
Two.
We got all the way to episode 67. We recorded it, seemed fine. And then I went to pull up the recording and our timing was off. And Chris, I don't know if I've even explained to you what the problem exactly was.
No.
So for whatever reason, I was just like 5 seconds delayed.
Mm.
So like the start was just you sitting there smiling for 5 seconds. And then you go, and I'm Chris. And then I go, hey, y'all, I'm Jay, and the whole
What?
video,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was worse than unwatchable. It was just like everything was there but it didn't go together right. So for the first time ever we've had to re-record a podcast.
The joys of technology, right? So
Yeah, but
that's
we
all right.
did let's do a little teaser too. We did just have a meeting with I guess we could say his name, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
Dr. Zach Bell in Okinawa, Japan, which is almost exactly on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Um, and we have a really exciting podcast coming up talking about, I mean, how would you sum it up, Chris? Like neuroscience and birds?
Yeah, some incredible studies that they've done in the past, that Zach has done in the past with birds, with reptiles, some correlations that they've found, correlations to diseases. I mean, I think it's gonna be really cool, Jay. I'm super excited about it, and Zach reached out to us, really interested. He watches our podcast, so if you see this episode, Zach, thanks, man, appreciate you, and those that are watching this episode once Jay posts it, coming soon, probably within the next week, of being able to showcase him and his research and maybe get something new on the podcast, right? Kind of different angle from what Jay and I have brought to our episodes. And I think it'll be really fun and an interesting take on birds and some of the stuff that goes into on the back end that no one really talks about on how we understand the animals around us in the world and what how we can use that research to better our husbandry skills and techniques, etc., preserve conservation, things like that. So it's gonna be
Yeah,
pretty cool.
one thing I learned from like our preliminary conversation that got me really excited and made me feel validated, there was a couple, we'll get into it on the podcast, so I won't spoil it, but there's a couple things that he's learned in research that kind of backed up, like I would call like I mean, I'm from Georgia, I live in Alabama, I would call it like country knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like I know that it's true, but I can't explain why I know. I just
Yeah,
know.
I can't prove it, but I know
Right.
that. Yep,
And then
totally.
I was, it's like, hey, don't touch that. You're gonna burn yourself. Like, how do you know? Like, touch it then?
Yep.
So that is backed up by the science, which I think is kind of what drew him in. And then
Yeah.
um the other thing that happened, I don't know if you caught this right at the beginning, Chris, right as you were joining the meeting, I said like, hey man, I'm Jay. And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, I watched the podcast. I know who you are.
Yep,
And
I did. Yeah, I did get
yeah,
that.
and I was just kind of like, oh yeah, duh. I kind of forget sometimes that like there's thousands of people that watch my videos. It's like hard to imagine. Like I don't picture it as like me giving a speech in front of 1,000 people.
Right.
But I have one video on Instagram that got 1.7 million views.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and it's like imagine trying to give a speech. Like I don't think there's ever been a speech in history that was given in person to 1.7 million people. So it's like, I don't think I'm famous. I don't think Star Magazine or whatever is going to call People Magazine's going to call me tomorrow and
You never
ask
know,
about my
Jay.
relationship status. But it's like, oh yeah, I guess if you've seen my videos, you would know who I am. So that was kind
That's
of cool.
that is pretty cool. No, we're excited. It's going to be really fun, and it was crazy. He's in Japan right now, so it's crazy to think that we're filming right now and it's dark outside and you could see the sun shining around him and it's morning for him the next day.
I think it was his
With
like his lunch break.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it just was really cool to see that, and so excited for the opportunity. So stay tuned for our next upcoming episodes to, and depending on how long it takes, the dude's well of knowledge, right? And so it could be a very long podcast that we divide up into different episodes, just depending on what the takes are and how that looks. So there may be multiple episodes or one larger one. I don't know. We got to figure that out, but coming
It's
soon.
got
It's
to
gonna be
be,
awesome.
it's got to be broken up. There was, I mean,
Yeah.
I tried to get him. I was like, "How much time you got? Can we just start recording?" And he's like,
Yeah, you
I
did.
gotta
Yeah,
go." But
he
he was
sucked
like,
us in. We were captivated. It was really cool hearing him talk.
he was in the middle of like a long, interesting paragraph, and I was like, "Hey, how much time you got?" And I think he thought that I was telling him like, "Wrap it up." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'll be done in a second." And I was like, "No, no, no, no.
No, like we
I'm not
want you to
trying to
keep
tell you
going.
to
Let's just
shut
start
up.
filming.
I'm just seeing if I can film." Yeah. So, I'm excited for that. I'm excited for today's topic too. I think today is, um, I think frankly something we probably overlooked. This probably should have been like
Yeah.
episode 4.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
or at least we did an episode on how we buy birds, but I don't think we covered this. And I think it's important. So today's episode is going to be take 2 of how to evaluate bird stores. You know, what do you look for in a bird store?
The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains.
All right, before we get to the recording, just want to do a quick reminder. Um, for 2 things. First of all, you can go on Chris's channel or his Instagram, and I need to get the link from you so I can post it on my stuff too, Chris. But
Yeah.
to get the Bird Nerd, Bird Brains, all those merches, and I
Yeah.
have a store also, but I don't have any Bird Brain stuff on my store, and I need to just do that too.
Yeah. I
But
was gonna say we can send over some stuff and put it on your store too, man.
yeah, but and we're just putting it all back into the podcast anyway, so I don't care,
Right.
which pile it goes in. And Chris paid for this merch, so I owe him some anyway. But you can get this sweatshirt is awesome, and then my kids, they're gonna watch this, so I'll show them. They love it to pull on these strings and make daddy
100%.
disappear for a second. They think that's really funny. I don't know why, but it's very funny for small children. So
Mine start like that, and then it usually ends with them trying to pull one string and get it all the way out, and I have to hurry and catch the second one to help
yeah,
them.
yeah, exactly. That's why these are different lengths right now from an incident such as that. And then separate from that, look, use code BirdBrains, get
10%
10%
off.
off. Go on New Zealand's website to the Perchville, and they've got seed, they've got medication, they've got nutrients, they've got toys, they've got millet. I mean, you name it for bird keeping, they've got it, or it's coming. Nest boxes, nesting
Right.
material. We are creating the one-stop shop. I don't have a bird store near me. What do I do? Or my bird store is great for this, but misses this, which is, I mean, a good segue into the episode, right? But if you're sitting here going, man, the nearest bird store to me is 4 states away, it's not. It's 4 clicks away.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
get on there and use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say they ship it all to your doorstep. So everything from the 20-pound bags of seed that they have down to a little tiny bird swing or medication bottle, right? Comes right to your front door, which is awesome. And actually ship pretty quick. So when I've put in orders, Jay, I mean it's literally that day that they've processed the order, and I usually have that product within just a couple days. That they're pretty quick and on top of things when it comes to shipping and getting it to you fast, which is great.
Yeah, and if you got questions, or we've had a couple people reach out and be like, "Hey, I really wish they had X," and it that it's one thing if they have it in stock to ship stuff. It's another thing if they have to order it. It's a whole nother thing if they've got to source it, right? So they've got
Right.
to find someone who can sell it to them so they can sell it to us, kind of a thing. So
Right.
there's some stuff we're still working on or trying to find like an alternative, like, hey, we really like this nest box, but we can't find someone who still makes them. So like, can we find someone? That kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we're working on all that. But if you're on the Perchville or you've already been and you're like, wait, why don't they have XYZ? Like, drop in the comments and tell us,
Yes.
and we'll try to get
Because
it. We're not opposed to that at all.
yeah, and New Zealand, they are very open to expounding the products that they have in their catalog. So let us know what they don't have. Have some patience with understanding that maybe some of these products may take a little bit of time to get them in the catalog as far as sourcing goes. But Jay, I mean that really plays into our topic. For me, at located here in Utah, we have a couple really small mom and pop bird shops that I've got about an hour north. Most of them, or both of them, mostly specify or are specifically towards your larger hookbills, your macaws, your cockatoos, Amazons. So, and very, very little stuff for finches. And so the next closest like major bird store that I could go for finches or smaller birds is Las Vegas, which is about 8 hours south of where I live. And so, um, being able to utilize companies like New Zealand that can send products to you is great. And maybe that's something we can touch on a little bit throughout this podcast, Jay, of other resources that we have available if you don't have a pet store close by. But for this first part, maybe we can focus on what are we looking for in a pet store, right, Jay? What are what's the first thing you look at when you walk in a pet store? What are the do's and don'ts when you're looking to buy products in pet stores or even birds? And if you don't have one close by, kind of like what I have, what do you do in those options?
Yeah, and I guess I want to say this too. So like this is not meant to be like an indictment of bird stores or anything or like
Yeah,
judgmental or we're just trying to give good advice here. So like there's different kinds of awesome bird stores. So like I'll shout them both out. I've got to the east of me about an hour. I've got Rhonda's Aviary in Milton, Florida, near Pensacola. If you're in that area, check them out. Awesome bird store. To the west of me, a couple hours in Slidell, Louisiana, just north of New Orleans, I've got Royal Avian Plus. Very different setup. They just kind of like almost like from the business side of things different, but
yeah,
also an awesome bird store. So it's not, there are different kinds of good bird stores, but we'll talk about kind of the generic things we look for. And Chris and I both do this. We both travel some for work or
yeah.
anytime we're traveling anywhere, frankly. One of the first things that either of us will do is Google exotic bird stores near me and go check them out.
100%. I just did that. So we were down we did a quick family trip just a couple weeks ago down in Vegas, and that's where I bought my Red Factor canaries that I've posted these last couple weeks, and did that exact same thing. Exotic bird stores close by to me, and the one that I bought the canaries from, I've been there many times because they actually are a pretty good bird store, and we can talk about that here in a bit, Jay. But the other bird store that I went and visited, the funny thing is and they were all specific on birds. You have a lot of pet stores that have multiple different species of animals, right? Reptiles and fish and things like that. This one had just birds. He actually had a couple plum-headed ringnecks, which is not
Something you
ringnecks,
want,
plum-headed
plumhead
parakeets, yeah,
parrot, yeah,
which is
which is on
something that
your
I
list.
100% want, but it was like $1,400 for the pair, and I was like, I don't have $1,400 in cash on me. But um, I asked him, I said, how come you don't have any small finches? And he's like, there's no money in that. No one wants to buy them, so I have to get the larger birds that are a little bit more expensive. And sometimes that's something that we run into as well, Jay, is a lot of the pet stores don't have a lot of bird products because maybe the quick turnaround in money is not there for them as far as a business aspect goes. You've got a few that are specifically tailored to birds only, and they've got like a business strategy that works for them. But yeah, they're becoming fewer and far in between when it's just a bird focused store, just because I do think there's a challenge out there to keeping a steady buyer's market locally for them to be able to have a facility full of birds to
Yeah,
sell. So
you have to be in one of the, I think to be really truly successful, you have to be in a relatively large city or in one of the really the three bird keeping hotspots, which is like the New York City
yeah,
metro, Florida, let's just say Florida, right?
yeah,
And then
Southern
Southern
California.
California.
Hmm.
Those are the three like that, those areas, those are the biggest markets. Yeah, and I mean, and we talked about this the first time we recorded this, but it seems to me like there are kind of two basic realities for your local bird stores. You either have like the perpetually almost going out of business, happy to break even bird store that's kind of in it for the love of the game, or you have a bird store that's really profitable, but they focus more on like they might have like Royal Avian, I think is kind of meets this description, and I hope I'm not offending them, but this is just my guess. Like I think they're doing well, but they when I walk into Royal Avian, they typically only have, and they're mostly large parrots, but they'll have some smaller birds too. But they typically only have like I think the most birds I've ever seen there is like 30.
Yeah,
Um, but they have a huge variety of like seed and toys and cages and
toys and cage.
stuff,
Yeah, hmm,
all the merchandise, the other things that you need, the dry goods, right? And then they also sell like dog food and chicken supplies and stuff. So that's how they're making that work, right? Like I think very few bird stores are making money, or at least big money, off of the
right.
actual bird.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean that is the business model I know for like your big box, your PetSmarts, your Petcos, your pet
absolutely.
supermarkets. Quick little aside, don't buy birds from those places. Um, some of them do have a policy that if a bird has been in the store X amount of time, the manager can sell it for free for like humanitarian reasons, which like the fact that they have that policy should be a red flag. But so I don't have a problem with you saying to a manager, hey, look, I've come in here 6 times over the last 6 months and that bird's been there all 6 times. Like, let's work it out. But don't those big pet stores. I mean, I told Chris this is about a year ago, maybe, Chris, where I went into a PetSmart. I think I had an hour to kill between meetings or something in a small town, and they had a PetSmart. I went in and I looked down at the canaries. They had canaries for sale in two cages. One cage had two foods, one cage had two waters. And whoever had refilled the cages had done two and
Whoops.
two instead of one and one and one and one. So, and I was like, hey, and they're like, I messed up. It's like, glad I was here. But
Yeah,
so it's just like those, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like the people that work there, like they're probably all animal lovers, but it's a big corporation. There isn't the training, there isn't the
yeah,
expertise. They're there to make money, and the only reason they're selling a zebrafinch is so that you'll buy a zebrafinch cage and zebrafinch food and everything, and that's how they'll make their money. And I've got a PetSmart. It's the closest like pet store to my house. And the only things I buy there are if I'm like really low on seed and I'm like, crap, I'm gonna need seed tomorrow, and I don't have time to go to Rhonda's. I'll buy just enough to get me through till I have time to go to Rhonda's, or I buy dog food there because that's easy.
yeah.
But yeah, so don't do that. Don't
I've
encourage
I've
those things.
I've got one that's literally 2 blocks from my house. I have bought birds from there before. It's been several years. And in the world of Utah, like I said, the closest bird store that I have that actually sells smaller finches is Las Vegas, really, for the most part. We've got a few mom and pop pet shops around that every once in a while they'll have a Lady Gouldian finch there or something like that, but they're selling it for a lot of money, and half the time they're not sure what it is, but
Mhm.
they just think it's pretty. But yeah, I agree, and and that takes me to the next thing when you are trying to get a bird from a pet store, right, Jay? Is what is their knowledge on the animals that they're selling? Are they just trying to get rid of it to put a few bucks in their pocket, or are they really trying to educate you and make sure that you're making the right choice when you're getting birds? Make sure it's going to a right environment, things like that. And I would say that for all animals in general. I actually remember when I got into fish keeping, Jay, I had put my, I just only had a 55-gallon freshwater tank, but I loved it. And we had a local pet store that their specialty was fish, and they trained their employees to make sure that they asked certain questions before they allowed people to buy the fish. And you have like college or high school kids that come in and they want to buy a bunch of goldfish to ask someone out to a local school dance, and they actually had a policy there. They had it on their front door. It was like, if you're buying fish to ask someone to a dance, go somewhere else, because they cared about their animals that much and they wanted to make sure that they're going to a
Mhm.
good home, a good environment. And they asked those questions, and they even asked me, like, hey, like, what does it look like? Show me pictures of the tank that you're going to be putting them in with. What other species of fish you have them with? Same thing goes with birds,
That's
right?
awesome. That's awesome.
And so it was really cool. And so make sure that they are knowledgeable, and more times than not, if they are knowledgeable, if they do care about their animals, the quality of animals that you're going to be getting from them is going to be higher, right? You're not they're not they shouldn't be selling you birds that are sick. They should be asking you the right questions. What are you putting these? Who are you putting these birds with? What does the cage look like? And instead of selling you a little tiny box cage for your zebra finch, they're trying to sell you, something bigger, or making sure that they're going to a nice aviary or a bigger cage that's not going to be overcrowded, things like that. So that's something that I look for when I go to different pet shops or bird stores, is how knowledgeable are the staff, how interested are they in making sure that these animals go to a good home, etc. I also understand they've got to make money to stay in business, right? So you have that both aspects and perspectives, but you can still make sure that your animals are safe and where they should be going to the right owners.
Yeah, I mean, I sell birds to a couple of bird stores, right? That's one of the places where my babies go, and the bird stores that I sell to, it is that, I'll get a text from the owner, right? And I'll be like, hey, do you have any Gouldians right now? I have somebody came in looking for Gouldians, which is also a good way for them to do business, right? Because then they don't have to keep them in stock if I've got them.
Right.
So, and then they say, sorry, I've got something in my eye. Try not to die on this podcast. But I've I hurt my knee too, so I'm icing
You're
my
just
knee. It's
falling
just
apart, guys. It's
just
just
I choked on my drink right before we started recording. I don't know. It's after midnight, no rules. So um but yeah, so and like I had one call me back one time or text me and say, hey, do you have any Goldings? And I was typing out my answer, and then she said, never mind, I don't think this guy should have birds. And so it's like I'm thrilled with that, right?
yeah,
I would rather you say like, never mind, like we don't need your business that bad, than I send a baby bird that I worked really hard to help create and be healthy and everything, and then
yeah,
it's going to a bad situation. So, um, I love that stuff. I I think those are important. I mean, let's talk about so some of the other things. So, walking into a bird store, one of the first things I look at is the smell
yep,
and the sound,
yep.
right? So you go in, bird stores should be loud, right? Especially
With
if they have any
big
big
birds or
birds,
small birds, both.
right? But like I would expect to hear kind of like the noises I hear in my aviary, right? I would expect
Exactly.
to hear chirping, chittering, squawking, screaming, all those
Singing.
things. Yeah. And then I would expect it to smell like birds, which is kind of hard to explain if you don't know that smell. If you're like, what does he mean? Next time you happen to be near, like holding your bird or something that you can smell it, just like
It's
get a
it's
whiff
it
of bird.
it's like a mix of your bird, but then also like a mix of the smell of your fresh seed. I mean, it's almost like a combination of that. Like if it's musty, if it's murky, if it smells like ammonia, or
Mm.
the poop, things like that. Those usually aren't good signs that they're taking care of their animals.
I was using a bag of frozen spinach and I think I leaked it all over my pants. Awesome.
You're
Ah,
striking out tonight,
I'm
man.
having a rough night. So. Yeah, so those things are really important. And then the next thing, which is kind of closely tied to this, right, is health of the birds and just the overall like their condition in the cage. So does the bird seem health, all the birds? So like usually they'll have store birds, those birds too. Every bird I see, does it have, clear eyes? Is it alert? What's the feather condition like? Is the food bowl full or have, is there something going on? Is the water fresh, clean in there? What's the bottom of the cage like? Is it really dirty? Is there a stack of bird poop, building
Right.
into a pyramid?
Yep.
Or did it look like, it's been changed in the last day or so, right? All those things, how,
And
how messy is it just in general, right?
yeah, and pet stores are going to get sick birds. We get sick birds, right? I mean that's just
Mhm.
something that you're not going to be able to avoid at some period of time. But I would hope that if those birds are ill, that they're taking them to the back of the shop,
Right. Are they
in
still for
solitude.
sale?
Right,
Right.
exactly. Are they still trying to sell them? Are they still clumped with the other birds that they had them in the same cage with? Things like that. I mean, is really quick indicators of if I see one bird that looks really off and he's paired with the rest of them, I'm not going to buy any of the birds because now I know that there's a chance that all of those birds have what the sick one has, right? And so just being
And
smart in that
look, we
aspect.
we know we talked about this. I mean, in our sick bird episode and in our heartbreaking stories episode, there have been times where I was like, I've got a list of all my birds, right? I know what birds I have. I know what birds I'm looking for. There have been times where I've had a bird that I was looking for, couldn't find. Okay, find it at a bird show, at a bird store, whatever. And then either it's sick or it's in a cage, real tightly confined, especially like
Right.
bird shows and the sale cages that they have with sick birds.
Yeah.
And it is so hard to just go, I can't do it. But you have to, or
Yeah.
you'll end up, that bird's gonna more than likely die. And if you bring it home, you're gonna more than likely bring your birds down with it.
Yeah. I was going to say more times than not, it ends in disappointment
Right.
where the
Like
birds were,
even us,
yeah.
right, at the advanced level, like I can treat sick birds. I do. I mean, heck, I apparently can repair femur fractures. I still will not buy sick birds.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
makes sense, and just keep that as a general rule of thumb, right? And if you, like I said, you're gonna have sick birds. Pet stores are gonna have sick birds. It's what you do with them. That's what I'm most concerned about, right? And so just making sure that the husbandry is there. Also, Jay, another thing I look at when I walk in is what types of products they have for sale for
Right.
birds. Uh,
Selection.
yeah, selection, brand type, right? I mean, the Harry and Hagen seed options or in products. Volkman's a pretty solid
Mhm.
brand as well. Some of those products that for sale and
Higgins. Yeah, those ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And a good variety is good, right? I don't want just one brand because it's nice to have some options and different varieties there, but just seeing what options they have available. And I understand that some pet stores may be limited on what they can provide, but want to make sure that what they're selling is actually beneficial for the birds. There are a lot of bird products and toys out there that are not safe or they're not healthy for the birds. And so, similar like when you're walking through a grocery store shopping for your family, we're looking at, labels on the back and we know which ones are more healthy for our families or not and being selective in that. And it's really the same with your animals as well and especially birds of, what is a good product to give to your birds, what is not. Make sure you're looking at the labels and tags on the back side of it and brands the brands that they're proven right and there's some other brands that are out there that don't take the extra step to make sure that their seeds are fresh and healthy for your bird. I mean, they sit in warehouses for months and months, sometimes years on end, and then they're shipping it out to be sold, right? I mean, that's like you buying a box of cereal that was made in 2020 and you're waiting until 2025 to buy it off the shelf. And so just taking some of that into
Right.
consideration.
And you got to remember too, like you wouldn't want somebody to force you to eat junk food all day, every day. My kids might, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't as the parent. And so like don't do that to your birds, right? We've talked about that in previous episodes, but all those things. So I mean, yeah, I mean. And then like I trying to quantify what else is there, but like I want to say like the happiness rating of a store, like the are the people, and maybe we've already kind of covered that with are they knowledgeable or whatever, but like are the people there excited to be there? Do they love the animal? What's the morale, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you can find a store that has healthy animals, a good selection, a staff that's knowledgeable, or I would add this caveat, knowledgeable, there's two ways to be knowledgeable, right? There is answering the question correctly, or there is admitting, hey, I'm not sure, and let's look this up. Like
Yeah.
the internet exists. Let's you and I just figure this out. Like there's a shout out Ronnie at Rhonda's. There have been a couple times where I was in there and somebody else was buying a bird or I was buying a bird and I wonder X, Y, or Z. And he doesn't try to make it up. He
Right.
we Google it, right? We learn, we figure it out right there, and then we know. So
Yeah.
I don't mind somebody saying, I don't know, let's figure it out. I do mind misinformation, right? I hate to use that
Right.
term, but I do mind, you know, somebody taking a shot in the dark.
Right.
So that's fine too. But those kinds of things, obviously customer service is always important at a
Right.
store.
We
Um,
we've got a local pet store, Jay, that they mostly specialize in reptiles and aquatics, but every once in a while they'll get some birds in, and I'm really good buddies with the owner there, and he'll do that, right? He'll reach out and be like, "Hey, like I'm looking at getting this pair of birds." He's like, what's the genders, what's the cage space requirements that I need for them, are they good with other animals, like so that he can sell them, appropriately to other individuals. And I appreciate that, right? He's
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
reaching out to me to get to know specifics and what he can tell his customers if they're interested in them. And I think that's really cool, and I appreciate that very much. So
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, I think this doesn't need to be a super long episode. I mean, I think that about sums it up. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Sorry it took us so long to get this next episode out after we already had that big pause and swore we were gonna do better. It wasn't our fault. But
yeah, yeah,
you know, if you have questions, if you want to know, if you're having trouble finding a bird store, New Zealand, if you're looking to buy birds and you want somebody reputable, Chris and I, we are, or we can help you find people that are. We know other people too that
right.
breed and sell birds, depending on where you are in the country and what makes sense for you and what you're looking for. Um, so don't hesitate to reach out, get in the comments here, or
Yes,
both
please.
of us. I think our favorite place to get is Instagram DMs is the
Yeah.
best place to reach both of us. Where else can they find you, Chris?
Yeah, reach out to me. Facebook and YouTube are my other platforms outside of Instagram. Bird Nerd for YouTube and Facebook, Bird Nerd 4 for Instagram. Looking at comments, trying to post weekly, look at comments daily, and answer your questions. I love opening up my Instagram and seeing that I've got messages in there, and especially from new people and the questions that you have. So keep those coming. And also, if you're like me and you don't have a pet store that's really close to you that sells birds, Jay and I do sell birds throughout the United States, the lower 48 United States. So uh, let us know if you're looking at anything like Jay said, and if we don't have it, we can get you in contact with the right people. So outside of New Zealand for other bird products and whatnot. So yeah, reach out to me on those platforms. Love to hear from you guys. Jay, how about you? How can they get a hold of you?
I got to keep track of this. So I've got TikTok, which might get banned right after I started mine. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Gave gave away all my info right at the end. I've got Threads, which sucks. I've got Reddit, which I do try to check the DMs there, but not every day, probably. I've got Instagram that I definitely check every day. Got Facebook that I check every day, and then obviously I have YouTube. And I probably forgot something. So,
Jay, we
and
need
that's
we need like a end of video credits that just start rolling up of all the platforms that you're on.
just double the length of every podcast. Um, but yeah, so we're on there. I'm the Javiary or the underscore Javiary on all these platforms. Obviously, you found my YouTube if you're watching this. So, I've also got something I've been meaning to mention on the podcast more. I both Chris and I have a playlist on our YouTube channels of every episode. So the episodes on my
Yes.
channel and the episodes on Chris's channel, you can just hit play all and you can start at episode one and you can go to episode 67 now.
Yes.
So if you're like, man, this is kind of tough to like hunt and peck and find it, and it also makes it easier to, if you're looking for the podcast on how to deal with sick birds, I think that's number like 11. It's easier to find it in that playlist than it is to try to go back through all of our videos and find it. So
Right.
just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that. And I think that's all I got.
Yeah. Let us know what comments you guys have down below, and show the love and support to your local pet stores and bird stores if you have them, but also take into consideration the things that we've talked about and just making sure that you're getting healthy animals and good products.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll catch you in
See
the
you
next
guys.
one.